You are listening now to the Spirituality Now podcast, the show that is solely focused on practical spirituality, leadership, and mindset skills with the aim and purpose of supporting you master your life. Welcome to the Spirituality Now podcast. Welcome to the Spirituality podcast. Today I'm going to emphasize the word tea because I have one of the persons that I admire the most that I met through not only social media but through tea, in a way of how they share the tea, the business they share, the Tao vibes they give. But before I introduce you to my guest, remember those of you who are in YouTube, you are already seeing him. So follow us on YouTube or all platforms. We are available in all platforms. Remember, we're right now, it may change. A philanthropic-based podcast. We're self-sponsored. Our company is self-sponsored. We have a brilliant futures production company that produces, edits, everything. We have like a little media company now that actually has been there for years. But we do that so you get our guests without the commercial, without me selling you the glasses, without me telling you about all of the things. It may change in the future in a good way that aligns with our podcast. I don't know, but for now we are self-sponsored, self-grown, and so any support that you can give us, liking it, subscribing, leaving comments, sending questions is of real helpful, not only for us, but for our incredible guests that are putting a bet on us too. They're taking a risk of coming to the Spirituality Now podcast now. Anyways, enough of that. So let me introduce you to my guest. It's an honor. It's an honor to have him here. I can feel the Tao vibes. I can feel like the lineage in him. When we speak about lineage, people often think about something in the past, but they don't understand that the past, the great teachers before us, the great scholars, the great illuminated ones, once you study them, your body, your here and now, spirituality now, becomes the living lineage of them. And this podcast is all about living Tao and living tea. And we have with us Colin Hudon, and I hope I'm pronouncing your last name well. And he's the owner and founder of Living Tea, which Colin developed his passion for tea and Tao through a lifelong immersion in Eastern traditions. As an herbalist, acupuncturist, and practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine, he discovered the profound depth of these traditions through the tea ceremony, which, for those of you who know, Gong Fu Cha, or the way of tea Cha Dao, and sought to share them in the West. After years of studying and traveling throughout Asia, Colin began sharing tea as a form of moving meditation and living art. I love this so much. It's meditation in a cup, literally, with thousands of tea ceremonies under its belt. In this lifetime, Living Tea continues to share ancient traditions and old growth trees with its audience. Living Tea promotes mindful, meaningful, and healthy living through the rituals of tea, which has been an essential tool for well-being for millennia. Millennia. Whether as a companion to meditation, a symbol of nourishment among friends, or an alternative to coffee. Tea has the power to transform lives. Tea and the Tao. Guided by Chinese medicine and the way of tea, Living Tea and Colin source fine teas grown with reverence for both the plant and the planet, and we will talk eventually about that. He also hosts incredible retreats, classes, gives a lot of value through social media, which I call, with people like Colin, I call it social media. The rest is social media, and it's driving me nuts right now. But I'm going to go back to the present moment. I'm going to focus on my beautiful guest today. And Colin, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for this opportunity to interview you and your magic.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. And I've been following your work. I feel like we're kindred spirits, even though we haven't had a chance to meet in person. And the reason I feel that is because there are some of us who are active in the world, whether that is through social media or through these digital mediums, who also the thrust of our lives, I don't want to speak for you, I'll speak for myself, but has been around a deep exploration of these ancient traditions and trying to understand them in the context of the modern world and how to, what does it mean to be a Taoist in the year 2023? It's an interesting question to explore, right? And why are these old earth-based practices and nature-based practices relevant in the world today? So as you mentioned, I work with tea and also with Chinese herbalism, acupuncture, cupping, moxibustion, qigong, tai chi, all of these beautiful practices that emerged out of a Taoist worldview. And I think because it's rooted in nature, it's why it is so there. Taoism is so fecund with all these different art forms and means of harmonizing with the natural world. And it comes out of a deep sympathy and feeling for the natural world and understanding our relationship to the natural world. So thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here chatting with you and look forward to what we get into today.
Wow. You just introducing yourself, I can feel, there is, I'm mindful to use the word term energy because I believe it's so misused and so it's in the marketing world so used as a component, but I do can feel the flow, the lineage. I can feel the wisdom, the living wisdom that you have immersed into your life and your practice and your world, which is, I really admire, because when people see me, it's like, oh, we're kindred spirits. I'm like, which part, because we do, I'm such a multi-dimensional kind of creator. But tea has bring it all into a point of stillness, which I think that you have mastered so beautiful. You have marshaled these sacred arts, ancient arts, that which are, I still don't know what they call them, past arts. I think these are the futuristic arts for the here and now that will propel us to move forward into the future. I myself, you are a real teacher of tea. I feel like a protector of the craft. That's why I try to interview as many great teachers of Tai Chi, Qigong, Taoist. I had a great Taoist priest on the show in you. So thank you for that. But I felt in your introduction, I made notes. So if those of you who are on YouTube make me see me like ta 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 ta, is my Speedy Gonzalez Mexican vibe. I'm making notes because I like to learn from my guests. So, Colin, let's start first of, probably this has been thousands of times asked to you, a little bit of who Colin is. And because I am so curious about how you arrived to tea, more than you arrived to tea, I really believe that tea summons us. I have a feeling that this Camellia sinensis plant, this spirit of tea, it really chooses, right? Who is going to be in its magic veil to help people awaken in its own beautiful way. So who is Colin? And tell us a little bit about you to start with.
Yeah. I'm still discovering the answer to that question. So we'll leave it at that. But my interest in tea really started as a teenager. I was obsessed with tea. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. There's not much tea culture in Colorado, right? But I spent a lot of time in the mountains. And between the mountains in Colorado and Eastern Canada, where my mother's from, a lot of time in the forest and near the ocean. And I think that what I was saying, that deep sympathy and feeling for the natural world, was kind of born out of my upbringing in close proximity to the natural world. And I was lucky in high school I went to a Jesuit all boys high school, which is probably the only reason that I learned anything in high school. Otherwise, I would have been very distracted. And I had a Jesuit priest who was a phenomenal human being who introduced Taoist ideas and the 8 limbs of Patanjali's yoga and French existentialism. And he was very, as the Jesuits are known to be, very worldly in his education and introduced a lot of Eastern ideas. And he introduced Alan Watts' ideas. He gave me Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse and Chuangzi's philosophy. And, So early on, around 15, 16, 17, I was introduced to Eastern ideas and felt that they really complemented the scientific materialism and the Western reductionist worldview that I felt was limited. There's so many benefits, of course, to modern technology, but we're just starting to learn the deleterious or the negative side effects of the scientific worldview. So I was reading these Eastern ideas, and I was obsessed with tea, and I was gathering tea from tea shops wherever I went. And every year for Christmas, I'd get boxes and put all these different teas and talk about the regions where they came from, which I had never visited, but I was just like obsessed. And everybody was like, "Why are you so into this thing?" And I didn't have an answer because there was nothing in the format of my early life that would have made me so obsessed with tea. But I just loved it, and I felt like there was more to it. And there was a woman who owned a little tea shop in Denver, and I would go in there and sit for hours and try all these teas. And I think she recognized that I had like more than a curiosity, but I was really like asking her a lot of questions. And she gave me a book called The Book of Tea by Kakuzo Okakura, and a Japanese tea master who had come to Boston to curate the Boston Museum of Fine Arts Asian collection. And he was a real character. You can just tell, he's one of those people in history you wish you could hang out with, because he seems like a really brilliant and also kind of rascally sort of maybe a little bit of a troublemaker, like Chuangzi or like Alan Watts, like these different teachers. And so I think I felt a resonance with him, and I read his book, and he spoke about tea ceremony and ikebana, Japanese flower arrangement for tea, and chabana, and different teachers of tea throughout history. And that's the first time when I read that book, I realized there is an ancient lineage of people who have found through tea a path and a way, a Tao, a way to cultivate this relationship with nature, and also to recognize that there's an intertwining relationship between meditation, tea, and enlightenment, in that tea can't be really described in words. It can only be tasted here and now. And the truth is that we can't really talk about the Tao because the words are so limiting and they're so limited. We can't describe reality with words because reality isn't made up of words. Reality isn't just material. That's an idea, right? And so the experience of tea as a mindfulness practice and as kind of a living art form transcends sort of language, and it's a doorway into, this term that's also overused, mindfulness, right? Into an experience of reality as it is in the moment. And so it's a cultivation practice. And I love the beauty of how simple it is, because you can access it like a cup of tea is so, there's no dogma, there's no, you don't need to subscribe to any belief systems to appreciate, fine tea. So anyhow, the short version is I've been obsessed with tea for a long time. And then I went
love that.
to the other things. Yeah.
I think that the people that I have met that have been really honing not only this skill, this master, this call, because tea for me, I keep saying this, it's a call for something, the gateless gate, if we talk about Zen, or it's like, it just takes you here where you were already, but it just awakens all the senses and everything. But everybody that has found that, we interview an incredible Zen teacher that really rippled, everything. In my case, his name is Maido Moore. We have a episode of him a couple of weeks ago, and it was very similar, like the texture and sharing of like finding it very young and being cold, and that part of obsession, Colin, which I think that people misunderstand obsession sometimes. But I think you need obsession for really, honing that mastery, that skill, that practice, and what you call a cultivation. I so love that. And I love that you were presented with that and with the support and the teachers and the right books, and that you were not only curious, as you said, but eager to go into that path. I find, and what you said of tea, when people see it, I am not a professional tea person like you. I am a tea, a chahin, right? I will serve you tea. I will sit with the tea. I serve the tea. The tea is my teacher. But I love that when people come into our tea tables and sit, there's no more hierarchy there. There's a synarchy, there is a camaraderie, there is like suddenly all the lineages of everyone just come into a fusion, right? Like you do this, I have some of your teas, a fusion of these different herbs from different mountains, different paths, different traditions, different religions, and suddenly in a cup we all sit in the table and we are the same. We're just a vessel drinking the tea being filled up by the cup of grace, by the cup of that moment. So anyway, so I really admire that you have that path since young and that you stick to it. Has there ever been a time where you were like, I don't want to be in this path of tea, I don't want to be in this path of Tao, or you stick through that? That's a question for me.
Yeah, interesting. I think when there was something, I think it was when I was reading Chuangzi, who was an important Chinese philosopher, and he's described as a mystic anarchist or a coyote bodhisattva. The stories from Chuangzi are always trying to flip your intellect. You can't quite, this is true of like Zen koans as well, right? You can't quite understand it intellectually. And it's by design. It's meant to push you beyond the mind that is always trying to separate everything. That's trying to calculate and break things down and create boundaries between reality and our experience of it. And when I remember I wrote, I've written journals, I write a lot. And I remember coming across a journal in like my childhood bedroom, maybe 8 years ago or something. And I had written at like age 16, I wrote in big letters on a piece of paper, I think I'm a Taoist. And at the time I was reading Chuangzi. And again, I didn't have any real cultural context for that, but it was understanding these principles of Taoism and the way that Taoism understands reality that I really resonated with a lot. And so I think ever since I've discovered that as a path, I have like an extreme curiosity. And so, I spent 2 years living in a Shaivik ashram with a Swami, and I've spent a lot of time in Vipassana Buddhism, in the Theravadan Buddhist path, and I've explored Tibetan Buddhism. And there was a certain point, I was involved in the Gurdjieff work for many years. And, there was a certain point at which I went, all right, Colin, you've been digging all these holes in a field, and they're beautiful explorations, these different wisdom traditions. But at a certain point, I believe a person does have to choose a way, because, otherwise you're digging these relatively shallow holes and you get a big field full of holes instead of depth in one direction. And so, I said, one of the first times I traveled extensively in Asia, I was there for 6 months. And part of my intention was, you have to choose a way. You can't just a little bit of this, a little bit of this. It's like window shopping. You're like spiritual window shopping, and if there's tremendous depth and wisdom in all these different traditions, but at a certain point, I decided to make Taoism the primary focus of my kind of inner development. So yes, I questioned it always. Of course, I'm always questioning, well, what about this and what about that? But in terms of my meditation, Qigong, tea, my core practice really revolves around a Taoist approach.
I love this so much, because one of the things that I've faced and my guests have faced is that what one path to choose, and then marketing in the world, they tell you you just have to choose one thing, but sometimes that one thing people feels limited. But I love how you describe it. You have to choose a way. You didn't say the one thing. you chose a way. I think that is far much more not only energetically attuned with and aligned with the soul, but it also resonates with me of like, oh, this makes sense. What is the way, the path that will resonate stronger with you? And I just love. I'm curious, Colin. Like, you said none of your family were in these traditions. None of your families were like Buddhist, and these you were like, were you like not the black sheep of the family, but like the different one in these regards?
You know, there's a curious thread that runs through my family. My mom's the eldest of 9 children,
Oh, wow.
and 3 of those children have been very involved in the Gurdjieff work and taught the movements in New York and Montreal and other places. And um, others have been, psychotherapists and doctors and involved in different kind of practices. So on my mom's side of this family, I feel like there's a strong spiritual curiosity. And, my brother left when he was like 23. He was starting his career in San Francisco, and he felt like there's more to life. And my uncle, who's very involved in the Gurdjieff work, said to him, for your listeners who don't know, Gurdjieff was a kind of Russian Armenian teacher who died, I want to say, in the early 60s, and brought a lot of Tibetan Buddhist as well as kind of Sufi teachings into the modern world, and started teaching around the turn of the century, early 1900s, in London and Paris, and then later in New York. And quite a profound teacher. But so my brother went to live in southern Venezuela, kind of near Brazil, to live with a woman there, Natalie de Salzman, who, she speaks 11 languages. She was a lover to T.S. Eliot. She was a pilot. She founded 60 schools in South America, a very profound master. And he spent 5 years living with her down there, and ultimately came back to the United States to go to medical school and become a doctor. But his wife's Venezuelan, and they're very involved in the work, the Gurdjieff work. So, there has been influences, and I think influences reach us depending on our receptivity, on our capacity for those influences to reach us. And the deeper one's inner work, the more receptive they are to certain qualities of influence and qualities um, of guidance, about a direction and a path to follow. So it's not just like our intuition, but it's how open are your feelers to the path that life is wanting to bring us to. And this is a big part of Taoism. It's the watercourse way. Which way does the flow of your life want to take you? And how much resistance do you have in our egoic structures? So, I think there's always been some of these influences sort of floating around me, but I didn't have the cultural upbringing necessarily to be that open and receptive to them. I just knew there's more going on here than, we're on a dead rock floating through space with, um, that it's all determined by Newtonian physics and accidental happenings. I always felt like
Exactly.
that's not enough, so.
Exactly. But I think that the not enough, the kind of the existential angst that many people feel of like the not curiosity, but like the questioning of who am I and what is this work for? What is the path I must take? It actually, we think we're asking. I feel we're being called. Every time I'm like asking, and then coming back to the way. And so for all of those things that you shared, they have been very strong also for me, especially Buddhism, especially that path, both Christianity and Buddhism, or the leadership of the Christ and Buddhism. But there's a way that it really calls you more, and that's the way that you have to walk, right? Well, not have to, but when you choose, just the doors begin to open up, the flow of the way of like the Tao that you say that is the waterway, and let's talk a little bit about that, because I've been in some of your lives that you teach freely for people, and every time that you taught, I was like, I feel like I'm in this ancient place. I know I'm here in the now. I know I'm in the modern world, but there's a sense of holiness, a sense of sacredness, a sense of flowness, and that you carry with you. That you are like, for me, it feels like the Tao has been embodied in your bones. And in Zen, there's a saying that Zen happens through the body, and without the physical experience, Zen is nothing but a merely discussion. I think it was Omori Sogen that used to say that. But I feel that in you, I feel that in your practice. So well, the Tao, when you choose the way, which is the way of the Tao, which is the same, like that, the Tao is a way, right? That cannot be spoken. You also arrive to herbalism, which I feel it just a component. It just adds on to it, right? It gives it more texture, more fullness, more wholeness. Herbalism, acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine. How did you arrive to that, and how did you integrated that in your philosophy behind tea? And then we're going to talk about living tea. Why is living? Why?
Mhm. Yeah. I feel that the reason Taoism really spoke to me is that it's rooted in an observation of the natural world that we can experience directly. Meaning, we all experience the natural world, but to the extent we engage it actively um, and develop a relationship with the natural world, which also means with ourselves, because of course human beings are nature. We, as Alan Watts says, the earth peopled, right? We're the byproduct of a long evolutionary biological process. And in Taoism, you have the most basic symbol of yin and yang, which are essentially the active and passive or receptive principles. And they're underneath all forms of change and difference that happens in the natural world, in the human psyche, in the annual cycles of the seasons as they're unfolding, right? And in the landscape from directionality to sexual coupling between females and males, but also like you see it in socio-political history, like between disorder and order, right? So it's this dynamic process of change, light and dark, fire and water, sun and moon, etc., that's underneath everything that's happening around us. And when you break that down to the next layer, it's around the 5 elements, right? And the unfolding of these 5 elements. These manifestations or the whooshing, they're phases of transformation and change that are constantly harmonizing. And I spend a lot of time in the forest where I live here in the mountains. And a lot of the work I do, you find this in Zen too, with forest bathing, right? Or practicing Tai Chi or Qigong in the forest. It's to harmonize and open up to the natural balance that you find in the natural world, and to recognize everything's made up of Qi or prana or energy, whatever you want to call it, and that we can draw that into ourselves, and we can open up these channels of communication with the natural world. And so maybe some of what you are feeling when I'm sort of transmitting or sharing some of these ideas, it's that I'm working to cultivate that energy actively. And, these are these governing cycles of their circles or cycles of unity that are around us all the time. And when I had this great idealism in my 20s of wanting to help people, right? Of wanting to, I was exposed to the 16 bodhisattva precepts early on, and I thought, what a beautiful and noble path. But I felt like I didn't have tools to help people, and it's a nice concept. But like, I can be present with you, we can have a conversation, but like, I felt like I need some tools here. And I was working for environmental startups and working in the world of sustainability. And at a certain point, I just felt like I need a deeper engagement with some tools to help people. So I went to school kind of late when I was 29 years old. I went back to school for almost 7 years um, for biomedical science and also traditional Chinese medicine. And I said, I want to understand how the human body functions. And then also through Taoism to understand the psychological and emotional components of human health. And then to understand how to support people in their own journey towards wholeness. Which is important today because so much of modern culture is about making us feel inadequate such that we go out and buy things so that we can feel more adequate, right? So I think ultimately my interest in Taoism and Chinese medicine came out of a wish to have real tools to support people in their spiritual growth and development, but also just in human health. And that's a bigger question. What does it mean to be healthy, right? But I don't know if I answered your question. I think so.
Yes, no, but I'm really enjoying that flow, that cultivation feeling. I'm being the recipient of this part. That's what I felt also in your classes. But these answers are question and tools. And I love that you mentioned the bodhisattvas. In November 2022, I took the four vows. I didn't. I have just taken 5 precepts of the Theravada Buddhist tradition. I haven't taken the whole precept things. My teacher said if you take the whole, you got to shave your hair, and my ego got involved, and so I love what you said. Like you needed tools. It's a spiritual glamorous thing to speak about the bodhisattva vows. It's a glamorous thing to say going to a Zen retreat and only go once. I see a lot of people saying like, "Oh, I was in a monastery. I lived there 3 days." I'm like, that's nothing. You got to continue. It's a process of consistent, like the nature, ever-ending recreation, cultivation. And I love that you said like you needed tools to help people, and that's where traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, herbalism, that is. People may say it like, what does he do? Herbalism, this. No, all of that is a component of this holistic way of serving people. And I think that's a modern bodhisattva kind of lifestyle, which I really love. And one of those tools, I got to talk about tea. One of your tools, I think, is tea. And I think that's the tea has been more accepted right now worldwide, right? Like by men, by women, by everyone. It's beginning to, there's a resurgence of tea for some reason right now, which I absolutely love. And and the tea ceremony. And I know that you're skilled in the Tao, you're skilled in all of this, and that you had a lot of travels into and diving into the Eastern tradition. So what does the tea ceremony? Let's begin to talk about the tea ceremony now that we have this as a tool, that we have this background. What does the tea ceremony represent? Just for people that don't know about this within the Eastern traditions, how do we apply it? And how does Living Tea, which is your company, aim to share this with the Western world?
Yeah, wonderful question. There's a phrase in Chinese which is "pinming lun dao," and it's a commonly used Chinese phrase which means to discuss and understand Dao through the taste of tea. And for thousands of years in China, not all great, but many great discussions of the Tao or the deeper questions of life, the mysteries of life, they've taken place at the tea table. And so the tea ceremony has been regarded in Asia for a very long time as a means of connecting with what's essential in life and what's essential in nature. And there are these symbolic images and punctuations in the ceremony that kind of draw the people participating into this kind of ancient space of connection to one another and to the plant world. And when you participate in a formal ceremony with somebody who has some training and knows what they're doing, and of course, there's nothing wrong with casual tea, of course, but in all likelihood, it won't draw you into this deeper space. There's this reminder in the tea ceremony of that intertwining relationship I was talking about earlier between meditation and tea and awakening. Because, when you read a lot of the haiku from, tea masters throughout time, it's often, things like, I sat down for tea and I drank and I was awoken from my sleep. And I realized nothing had changed, but it's like the awakening to the moment as it actually is. So much of tea is about just waking up to what is. Waking up to this moment as it presents itself. The light passing through the window, the curling incense, the sound of the water boiling in the kettle, the subtle flavors in the tea that connect you to the terroir where the trees are grown, and to the sunlight and starlight and the insects and animals that live in the trees. These tea trees can be thousands of years old. And so they're gathering all of the energy of all of the natural environment and then concentrating it in the leaves. And then we essentially use fire and water to put the leaves to sleep, and then we wake them back up with fire and water. So there's an alchemical, elemental thing happening when we work with tea. And by creating space for it, a tea ceremony is you just sit and you drink tea and you be present with the moment as it presents itself. It wakes us up to, we're living inside a giant miracle, just being alive, right? But we often don't institute these modes of reflection or these experiences where we're actually connected to, like, oh my God, it's so extraordinary just to be alive and aware and awake. And the tea ceremony can really invite that for us, So Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Zen master who passed a couple years ago, he says, drink your tea slowly and reverently, right? As if it's the axis on which the world or the earth revolves, slowly, evenly, without rushing towards the future, And so sometimes things in tea, they seem very obvious, but then we experience them and we go, it's in what's obvious that there's, it's in the mundane that the numinous exists. That's very central to Zen and Taoism, is that all the extraordinary beauty of life is right here and right now, So.
I feel like, okay, podcast done. I'm taking a plane. I'm taking a class with you. It's wow. This is interviewing you is like sitting with tea. It's really being in ceremony because just of your awareness. You just how you were describing the kettle and the fire. For me, I was experiencing it. Right, the steam. I mean, can we talk about the steam? It's just phenomenal to see the steam. I could stay hours, well, not hours because of not the steam is gone, but just watching as the steam. I think of the clouds. I think of the mountains. It's just in that moment. I'm not exiting the moment. I'm being in the moment. I'm being the universe in that moment, and I love that, and I love how you are, linking it and explaining it to people to understand that that's why it is like a moving meditation and living art that you spoke of. So, for many years, you studied and traveled throughout Asia, which I love too. What are some of the most profound lessons that you will say you received? And that you are bridging and bringing, obviously, some of those you are already giving it to us, but the most profound lessons that you receive around tea and its cultural significance.
Yeah. I think one is reorienting our relationship to convenience. There's in Zen, there's 5 Zen meditations, and they're considered useless activities. And so the first is Zazen, so just sitting, seated meditation. The second is walking meditation. The third is drinking tea. The fourth is feeding fish. And the fifth is quiet nature streaming, which I spoke a little bit about earlier, which is just letting it in, letting it all happen. And Zen's so wonderful because there are all these useless activities that are absolutely essential to human happiness. I don't know about feeding fish, but like the teachings in Zen are about, are you aware that you're alive?
Yes. And who
And
are you?
yeah. And, human beings are so busy trying to control nature and each other, even at the level of the mind. And we're destroying the planet, as well as our ability to take in life as it is in this moment. We're blocking the flow of reality through cell phones and apps and Instagram and our endless addiction to information and to thoughts and to stimulating the mind. Through transportation and commerce and money, and again, these things all have their place in life, right? But if we become slaves to them, then we become like automatons, mechanical pleasure stimulation machines, like we're looking for constant stimulation. And I think tea can help heal this. Um, Especially if we brew it in this inconvenient way, right? Which is to heat it in these kettles over a flame or over charcoal. And, I have a stream that runs through my backyard, and I go out. I'm so thrilled that it's thawed. So it just started flowing in the last couple of weeks. So I go out in the morning and I gather water from the stream and then heat the water over charcoal. And it's like inconvenient. And then, preparing the tea where it's multiple steepings and I sit for an hour, and to somebody else, they go, well, why don't you just use your electric kettle and hit the button and it'll heat it to the perfect temperature and then put a tea bag in a mug, and like it's so much easier. You can do other things at the same time. And I say I'm specifically doing it in this inconvenient way to help heal the mind that wants everything to be so easy and convenient.
Wow.
Because we miss so much in life. We miss so much. And I think so many people are stressed out and overwhelmed and levels of anxiety and depression and irritability and a sense of feeling lost are so common nowadays. And I think part of it is because we're not creating space in our lives to be in communication and connection with reality in the moment as it is, and we're just missing so much of what's happening. So I don't know that there's some quote profound lesson. I think it's more just about wanting to be here for my life, and not wanting to be asleep and kind of just going through the motions of life.
Wow. Wow. What I love that inconvenience used as a healing method. I'm doing this purposefully to heal the addiction of the mind, of the easy, the fast. And I'm going to say the tea tastes different when you brew it that way. I mean, I don't know. You probably can. I'm just a beginner on tea, and I think I'll always be. But I can tell, like, oh, this has been brewing electrical. I don't take tea in a little bag, right? But I have a respect for tea as a teacher, and I think you are bringing that into your words for all of us. So we're going to talk a little bit about living tea and your beautiful teas. I have some of them here. I love how you, those of you who are watching on YouTube, how you send these like description things. For me, this was like, oh, it's a treasure, What is the tea? What is it for? How do you brew it? This is just amazing. And I think this is your tea subscription. We'll talk about it at the end. But what distinguishes, because I could feel your tea is having the chi. I could taste the chi of the tea. So what distinguishes the tea sourced by living tea? What distinguishes? What is the difference? What you are aspired to convey in the tea that we drink, and how do they reflect this reverence for both the plant and the planet, which is big for you?
Yeah. So, for a long time, tea was part of the herbal pharmacy or pharmacopoeia in Chinese medicine. And it was related to as a medicinal herb, and it was incorporated into different formulas with other herbs. And I can say more about tea as medicine, but that might be a whole other podcast. But
You are welcome to come whenever you want.
okay, great.
Like this is open for you.
Yeah, thank you. Um, the because it's considered what's called a Shen tonic, and a Shen tonic, the Shen is the spirit of the heart, and it's a very important concept, the Shen in Taoism. That being said, living tea. So I relate to it as a plant medicine, not as a beverage, and it means that it has to be grown ideally by seed instead of from a grafted clipping. Sometimes in these old growth gardens, it's hard to tell if the original trees were from grafted clipping or seeds. But essentially, older trees, so most of our teas are from trees that are at least 50 years old. But we do often carry teas that are from trees that are 4, 5, 800-year-old trees, old growth. So seed grown, old growth trees, free of any chemicals, so pesticides, herbicides, weed killer, fertilizers. And that one's significant because the very vast majority of tea grown in the world has all sorts of gnarly chemicals in them. If your medicine is grown with poison, it turns poisonous, right? And it's really deleterious to these growing environments because the chemicals get into the groundwater, which gets into the rivers, which then affects the entire agricultural system, and it's no bueno. And living wages for the farmers, so that we try to look at what is the real cost, not just the financial cost, but what is the real cost from an environmental perspective, a human perspective. All of that goes into the tea, right? And then, of course, preparing the teas ceremonially. And for people just transitioning away from, like if you cut open a tea bag from the most tea bags that are out there, which is those are plantation teas, it's like dust, and it's processed in a way that releases all the oil and tannin and flavor in one steeping. So that if you want more tea, it's profit driven. You have to go get another tea bag. Whereas good living tea, like the ones we work with, you can brew them like dozens and dozens of times and it still produces a beautiful tea, right? So one of the ways to tell the difference between a plantation tea from a little bush versus an old growth tree with all these qualities is if you can steep it many times, or if after one cup it's kind of devoid of flavor and aroma and everything. And then, of course, like you pointed out, how does it make you feel? Good, strong tea from good old growth trees, it changes, it has a psychosomatic effect. It changes the way you feel. Good, clean, living tea should never make you uncomfortable or jittery at all because all of the constituents of the tree are intact. So it's not just a strong burst of caffeine. It's balanced out with theanine and the L-GABA and the anthocyanins. And there's all these different components that balance the tea. So it actually makes you feel really in harmony and almost in a meditative state. Good tea can immediately put you into a meditative state.
Yes. It's an alpha, it induces you in an alpha state immediately.
Yeah.
I mean, good tea.
Good tea. Yep, exactly. So those are some of the criteria for what I look for. And, I travel to different growing regions and different mountains, especially in Yunnan, in China, in Taiwan, in Fujian, in Eastern China. And, COVID was a little hard for all of those things. And luckily I had some good relationships, but I'll be going back. I think I'm going to start actually bringing some groups over to travel in Asia.
I was just about to ask you, when is your next trip to China? I studied tea ceremony skills at the Shaolin Temple with Shaolin monks. And China has a place in my heart because it's the mother of tea, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was going to ask you, after you complete this, if you are having events, if you are educating people and going to because I think there's such a powerful connection to go there to the mountains, to the tea, to meet the farmers. It's different than, I love to have the tea here, have a piece of their heart here. But I love that. So I hope that you can let us know when you do that so we can share it with people.
Yeah, there's some big changes happening right now for living tea in that I'm stepping out of, I'm still the founder and owner of the company, but I'm stepping out of my role as the CEO in the sense that I'm not going to be doing operations and marketing and accounting and all the aspects of the mundane running of the business, which I have been doing for 14 years. Um, and I'm shifting, a lot of that's being handed off, the administrative and operational side of the business. And I'm shifting really exclusively into a role of teaching classes, events, workshops, traveling. So that'll be 95% of what I do is just in that role, which is a big relief for me because while I've been able to run the company in terms of all the other things, it's it's a lot, and it sort of undermines what I feel is I should really be focusing my energy on. So I think, you know, I'm going to bring a group, I believe, in the fall to Yunnan. Um, and I'll be doing some retreats either here in Telluride in Colorado, but also in other locations. And actually, I think I'm going to be down outside of Mexico City teaching a retreat in probably late summer up in the mountain outside of Mexico City. And something on the East Coast. We'll have a lot of things happening.
So whenever you have it, we'll make sure to share it, and we'll make sure to add the calendar because we can always add it later on. I think people need to know you are answering, I have a list of questions here and you are just flowing naturally. You just answer. I had a question of what was the future goals or development for Living Tea. You just answer them all, everything. Like, I don't even have questions. I got to pull it with the flow. I'm definitely going to invite you back whenever you have the time to talk about tea as medicine. But I really appreciate all your sharing, all the living wisdom, the living Tao, the living flow, and the tea that you're bringing to not only our community, but as a representative of the healing ability that it has for all of us, especially with social media. I mean, what you were saying, I've been in the family constellations kind of service for more than 20 years, healing trauma, all of that for more than 20 years. I'm taking a step back like you after 20 something years of doing all of that. Just to focus on a book and helping people in a different way. But I love when you shared about the tea having that ability to heal us from all of this externalization of self, right? Like it's costing so much. The suicide rates right now from little kids, because I'm attentive to that, because I'm a volunteer to help people with eating disorders and all of that. And so consistently I have to catch up with those numbers. Not fun to see, but something that I have to have in my awareness to support people with and to know what we are facing in these times, right? In these very stormy, artificial storms created by our inability to face who we are sometimes, into the distraction world. And I love that you're bringing tea, the living wisdom. And I'm going to tell people here, to follow you not only for the tea. I mean, everybody should get the tea too. But the teaching piece that you bring, again, for me, is healing. It's not only an educator of the mind. There's this embodiment, this cultivation that awakens that living wisdom within us too. So, hi, Colin. I could talk to you. Like, I'm really feeling like I gotta go drink tea with this teacher. Honestly, this is the what is prompting me to do. I will. But what would you? I know we're coming to the end of the podcast for now. What would you, well, first of all, what would be a good tea for people to start with through living tea to start the practice, just briefly? And then after that, what would be a blessing that you would like to give to our audience? We're going to a lot of the Latin American communities in this podcast that speak English. And I did this for a purpose and a reason. So, what would be a blessing that you can give to them all with this? So, what is a good practice for them to begin with? And then, what would be a blessing that you would like to leave them with for this podcast?
Yeah, beautiful. So, for people who are starting out with tea, the easiest practice is just to get a tea bowl, and we have some made by master ceramicists. They're works of art, these tea bowls. They're by people who drink tea every day, for who have been for a long time. So there are all these little qualities that make a really tea bowl beautiful. So much of tea is a celebration of beauty, and that comes in the form of ceramics as well. And so you just need a tea bowl. I usually recommend people start with a nice red tea, which is what we call black tea in the West. It's called red tea in China. Because red tea is a little bit enlivening, it's easy to brew. So, other teas are very finicky, the water temperature and how much leaf amount. Usually, red tea is pretty forgiving. And you just use a couple leaves, like 5 to 10 leaves. They say the poetic description is like leaves on the forest floor in the autumn. And the translation is you can see the bottom of the brewing vessel, whether it's a teapot or a bowl. You can see the bottom, but it can be covered. And of course, if you want the tea strong, add some more leaves. If it's too strong, use less. And then a kettle, like this kettle or some kind of kettle to heat the water, right? And you might want to get a little infrared burner or something that you can sit next to you, so you have somewhere that you sit every day. It's different to sit in a meditation spot, or like Joseph Campbell talks about having a place in your home for meditation and for practice that pulls you to it every day, instead of like in the kitchen with a mug. So it becomes part of your meditation. You heat some water, you put some leaves in your bowl, you pour water at a 45-degree angle and let the leaves spin, which kind of reminds us of the movement of the universe, right? And you just sit and have 3 steepings in silence without any distractions, and just be with the leaves, be with your own inner experience. Take note of the state of your mind, of your emotions, of the sensations of the body as you kind of wake up. And that can transition into a meditation. And that, as a morning practice done with a little bit of discipline or diligence, can be transformative. So I would recommend, like a tea like Nymphaeus or sapling, or one of our larger leaf red teas. And if you look at the pictures of the red teas on the website, you'll see some of them have bigger leaves. Because if they're really little leaves, they get stuck in your teeth. Um, so that's my the simple way to start a tea practice. A slightly more advanced version, and I won't go into too much, is I send out a seasonal tea club, which you're referring to, every 3 months. That's connected to the 5 elements, and I do a write-up on the element and some central ideas to think about. Okay, the metal element is about cutting, and in nature, there's a cutting away of the leaves falling, and our relationship to letting go. So I'll go into different aspects of what's happening in the natural world and how to harmonize with nature through those special teas that we curate for each season. So the seasonal tea club is really, I put a lot of love and energy into that aspect of it. And then the last thing is I'm teaching a seasonal course. So I just finished the spring course. So we do 5 or 6 classes every season. And I go into movement, I go into food, herbs, diet, teas, tea brewing. So that's a really wonderful way if you want to go deeper into some of these teachings. And I'll launch the next course probably mid-May. We just finished the last one on Saturday for the spring.
That's wonderful. We will make sure to put all of the links, your social media, the subscription box. We're going to put them all, because I know that people always ask us, but where we're going to put it? They don't have to go fetch. It's going to be everything when we publish the podcast in the description and in the copy that we share. And
Yeah.
I think you've been giving us so many blessings, but I'm still going to be a little bit, what would be a blessing, the blessing that of the Tao, of the tea, that you can give to the audience today, besides all the beautiful living wisdom that you share with us today?
Yeah. I feel like the one, maybe I'll say, this is a teaching that tea has brought me back to through a daily practice, which is a connection to our intrinsic value. And we spend so much of our lives, as I like the way you worded it. You said looking for ourselves outside of ourselves. And I think this is such a common sort of ailment, psychological and emotional ailment, especially in our modern age, that this depth of discontent that so many people feel, this sense of disappointment or of, dukkha in Buddhist terms, of this dissatisfaction with life. And so we're constantly seeking and searching and pining for and desiring something other than what is. And so I think connecting with this basic wisdom of you are enough as you are, and you have tremendous value and worth by virtue of just being alive, that the chances of a human being existing it's an impossibility statistically, And so connecting with that, and when you sit for tea and sit in silence and you just connect with the moment as is, and you create some space for your inner life, that is, I think, an invitation I give to people just to connect with who they are and understanding that they are enough as they are, and you don't need to be more than you already are. You're an impossible miracle already. And the second one I would say, is spending time in nature, finding some time, even if you're in a city, you can, go to a park and connect with a tree or something. And connecting with the aliveness, the beingness of a tree or an animal or something in the natural world, and not perceiving it through the mind. But not seeing the form or the language that you use to describe the thing, but just connecting with the beingness of the thing itself. As Eckhart Tolle says, he says, when you perceive nature with the mind, an ancient forest becomes timber, a bird becomes a research project, the mountain is something to be mined or conquered. And if we can develop a relationship with the natural world that's not based in the mind, then we start to participate in this evolution of consciousness on the planet. And I think this is a way out of the prison of the mind. And not everybody's mind is a prison, but we spend so much time lost in thought. And so connecting with the tea leaves, with the trees, with the natural world from a deeper level of being, beyond just the mind-made reality that we inhabit, is the path of healing. And I think it shows us the way home.
Beautiful. Wow. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for the way home, Thank you, Colin, for being here. It's really an honor. Again, the doors of this podcast are open for you whenever you'd like. We're going to make sure to share every information, detail, website, subscription, links. We're going to make sure to put all of those links for the people here. And I wish everyone has a beautiful present moment here and now, cup of tea, of living wisdom and living Tao, because I think that's who we are as well. So thank you, Colin, and thank you everyone for listening. Remember to share, subscribe, follow in YouTube, click the bells or whatever that is. And I will see you with another guest in the following weeks. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I wish you well with all the wonderful work that you're doing as well.
Oh, thank you. Un beso. Bye-bye.
Un beso.
We hope you enjoyed this new episode. And if you did, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere where you prefer to listen to your podcast. Make sure to check the links to everything we mentioned in this episode. For more news, future or past episodes, or for any other inquiry, please visit our website at delaflorteachings.com. Once again, thank you for listening to the Spirituality Now podcast.